Welcome to Circular Firing Squad. I'm Marty, a counseling faculty at Kent State University and host for Circular Firing Squad. We've got 4 members, 4 questions, and 4 answers to each question. Each squad member generates a question that we all have to answer, ranging from the academic to the abysmal. And we've got a good crew with us tonight. Let's go around and introduce ourselves.
Hey everybody, I'm Britt Pollard-Kozadowski. I'm a professor and grad coordinator at Indiana University of Pennsylvania.
Good evening, y'all. My name is Mitch Conrad. I am a third-year clinical mental health counseling student at Cleveland State University and a counselor trainee working at Baldwin Wallace University.
Hi, everybody. Elliott Ingersoll, host of Apply Topically and professor of counseling at Cleveland State University. The one in Ohio, not Tennessee.
Have you ever been to the one in Tennessee, Eric?
No, but I really feel like I should go as a form of pilgrimage, really.
Wow,
Yeah. bring them all the good joy. And Elliott has the first question tonight.
All right. What are your optimal conditions, physically, mentally, etc., to be ready to, I would say, facilitate or engage in class?
Am I up first? All right, I will go first. I think for sure physically I have to have had enough sleep and hopefully some time outside in the day to be able to be at my best. I also have to be, I think, pretty engaged with or passionate about the topic that we're going to talk about that night. It's hard for me to feel like I'm at my best or like I'm fully prepared when it's a dry topic or it's a topic that I don't particularly have any real interest in myself. If I can come up with something creative for whatever it is that we're doing, that always helps as well. That's when I tend to have the most fun, is when I'm able to do along with the students for whatever the night may hold. But that's one of my favorite places to be, honestly. So I wouldn't say it takes a whole lot for me to be ready to facilitate class. It's usually something I'm looking forward to.
Mitch, why don't you go next?
Sure. So as someone who's gotten into doing a little bit more teaching and workshops lately, I think the biggest thing is going to be personal interest for me. If I have a personal interest in the content, especially if I've done at least the majority of creating the content myself, it's a lot easier to just kind of like go and, kind of like, I don't want to say like off the cuff, that implies something different. I think in terms for me, I really enjoy being prepared for class, which is very much not how I am as a counselor. How I am as a counselor, I think, is I don't do a lot of preparation necessarily for sessions. I read like previous notes, but I really let the client lead, especially, in that, with that person-centered therapy focus. I think the idea for me inside of the classroom is that I like having a significant amount of preparation, but I also like to leave time for student activities if I, especially like, because I've been thinking a lot more about like how to get people to actively learn in session as opposed to like just doing like didactic lecturing like that. I don't really learn best by that. And so getting students involved or getting participants in like workshops involved in some form or fashion really resonates with me, because while I do like to stand up and share information and offer perspectives, I really enjoy the idea of like having prepared activities, things for students to do, especially for like a 3-hour workshop or class. And so that's something I've been thinking a lot more about lately, is like, what are specific things that I can do and provide for students to be engaged, especially during those long classroom sessions.
We're doing a different format tonight, so if people are watching this, you might notice that we're using software called Ecamm in order to do this. And that means I'm not only trying to organize things, but also shifting the camera around to meet needs. This question.
Ecam, ecam, ecam.
No, Elliot, don't do that.
It's easy, Elliott. That's great.
This question is for me a tough question because I think some of my best classes are ones where I walk in cold. Now, my students might have a different opinion of that. I'll have some slides. I'm not a big fan of using slides, so I try to do it in a minimalist perspective. But I'm surprised how much one or two things on a slide will either trigger a story or a comment or the part for me that is so surprising is how much is stored in my head that I don't have notes for that just kind of comes out in the moment. And when that happens, I'm loving it because I think I'm being immediate and in the moment with the students who are there, and they're hopefully seeing me as in the moment and as very real and genuine and not scripted. So those are for me what I consider probably my best classes when I'm not fully prepared, but there's a lot in my head that I can move through the class with ideas. I always like to break it up as much as I can. So, 20 minutes on of me talking, 20 minutes off of me talking and them doing, or 20 minutes of us talking together. But yeah, there have been some classes I've told Aileen before I left to work, I'm not ready for this. I don't like this. I don't know. I don't like this feeling. I feel a little bit of the guilt because I'm not better prepared because students are there. And then I go in, and from my perspective, when I come home, it's like, wow, that was really cool. Stuff happened during the class I didn't expect to happen. And I managed it like a professional in terms of looking very professional and responding very professional. So there's some secret sauce in there, Elliot. I don't know what it is, but I know good days and bad days, and the good days surprise me more than the bad days do.
These are all great answers because you get slightly different perspectives on it. What I was thinking of is like whatever's going to happen, how am I going to be at least close to optimal? And it's very similar to like music or theatrical performance. I'd like my stomach to be empty like 3 or 4 hours. I like to go in almost really hungry because my brain seems to work better. And then when things do happen and we have an opportunity to break into more dialogue or whatever, I'm attentive to it. So yeah, it helps if I had some exercise in the last day, but definitely having an empty stomach seems to facilitate that for me.
Okay, Britt, how about you go next?
Sounds good. I just wanted to ask a very light question tonight. So, do you believe humans are inherently good, or is morality something that we learn?
I think that goes
where
to
to even
Mitch.
start here?
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. So I'm gonna just offer a perspective as opposed like I don't want to. I guess my concern here is I don't want to like paint with like a broad brushstroke for kind of like the idea of like everybody that I think this about everybody or that this is how it is for everybody. I think that like my perception or perspective is that humans are sort of inherently neutral. If that makes sense, I guess there's the idea for me of like people have like their personal reality and morals, and people also have like, and we also have like collective reality and morals. And so inside of one's own like personal reality, like morality is subjective, and so there's some things that we can observe in society where we, individuals believe like that this particular, you can think of like religions, like specific religions or religious beliefs, that certain things are moral and certain things are not, right? And so individuals adopt those beliefs as they kind of like grow and learn. I suppose like without learning, without the idea of like learning or growth, I wonder sort of like where the idea of like morality would even come from. There has to be like experience to experience morality, I guess. And so in that regard, I don't necessarily think that, like, I know that I have my own personal morals, but I don't believe in sort of like subjecting other people to them. They're sort of like my opinions, and they like inform like my life and like how to live my life. And certainly they impact like how I would prefer for others to not like live their lives, but like I sort of, there's a reason that we adopt our own morals, and there's a reason that sometimes we argue or contend or offer a perspective about like our morals. I also think that we have like this idea of like collective morality, sort of like what is the greater like opinion of society, and that's kind of like how, in my opinion, like laws can get represented or laws can get created, is the idea of like what is the collective really saying in terms of like what does the collective like want the experience to be. And so there's kind of the idea of like something like, obviously like murder is illegal for a reason. I consider murder immoral, from like my perspective, but there's some people out there who don't like, who either like, I would say like don't consider it immoral or are willing to like engage with it in certain ways, like inside of a spectrum, right? The idea of like something, I remember watching Oppenheimer not too long ago, right? And it's like, yeah, was that a moral decision or not, right? There are certainly people advocating on both sides in terms of like dropping the atomic bomb, of like, was this something that was moral or was this something that was not moral, right? And so in that way, we sort of have like not just our like personal morality that develops over time, and the conversation about like spirituality probably outside the scope for my answer, because I've been going a while, but I think the idea is that like we learn and grow over time, and we see like what fits with us and what fits with our perspective, or like what doesn't fit with our perspective or not. So in that regard, I think I'm not sure if like inherently like good makes like, that's not necessarily been part of my experience. Like I do think that like I observe that like most other people in my life are like trying to do good, and that's that part's important to me, but I do highly like identify with the idea of like neutrality, in that because like morality is subjective, there is at least a neutral component to all maybe not all moral quandaries, that's kind of tough, but to many moral quandaries, I think the idea of like neutrality really resonates for me. And so born good or born bad, I sort of identify less with that than the idea of, right, like people are born neutral and based on their experiences learn what resonates for them or not in the moment, and that can change in the future.
Thank you. Oh, I can't hear you, Marty.
I read the question and I thought, oh boy, and didn't think much more about the question until this very moment, because just didn't think much of the question. But my immediate answer was, they're born inherently bad. And I think I'm still being shook by the last, and totally confused by the last election, because it feels like the morality has gone completely out the window of what's the right thing to do. if, given how the vote turned out, and that's my own personal political opinion, but it makes me feel like there are a lot of people who either are foregoing morality or have never been taught morality. And as a result, it's, I would say that's where I landed on the fact that they're basically born bad and have to be taught kind of morality and have to be taught some of the qualities of humanity that separate us from animals. So that's my answer. It's not complicated. It's not good. Doesn't make me happy to have to say that, but that's my answer.
Yeah, that's a good question. I came to a conclusion on this probably within the last year, I think. I think we are definitely a mix, but not in the Zoroastrian sense of no resolution. I believe consciousness is a building block of the universe, and believing that, it's axiomatic for me that we are inherently good, and that the good wants to transcend the more negative qualities or evils that we harbor, and that's why we learn. That's how we learn. But yeah, that's my very recently arrived at thought on it.
Well, thank you all for the answers. It's giving me a lot more to think about. I really struggle with this question, and I'm not sure honestly where even I land on it. It makes me think of the traditional nature versus nurture debate, and I think my gut answer is that people are more so nurtured toward morality or away from morality. But then I think about people I know who are just naturally, seemingly inherently good or bad. And I'm curious about where that comes from for folks. So I'm not sure really where this question came from, but it's something I've been grappling with since I thought of it, and something I'd like to explore a little further for myself at least. So thank you all for contributing.
All right. Yeah, that was a fun question. I like that. So hopping into something slightly different, what is your favorite thing about providing counseling?
Well, I think I'm up first on this one. I the thing that for me is there's this kind of magical part of counseling, and as much as we talk about being intentional and all the stuff that we do that has to fit into some sort of theory or approach that is organized in a structural way, and you just follow the recipe and you get the result. For me, it's the magical stuff that I really enjoy. The things that happen in a session, and I think this will go. I think we have a question. I have a question that actually came because I was trying to answer this question. For me, it's the kind of things that, again, that you don't expect are going to happen and then happen. When a client brings something in, you're working on something with them for a period of time, and then something completely changes in their life, or they have some change in point of view, and they bring in something different, and you have to, on the moment, make your decisions about where you're going to go with this, how are you going to support this, how are you going to help the client in that moment. That sort of stuff I live for, because it's non-scripted, it's spontaneous, and generally it's where I'm at my best. It's where I can pull together things that I've heard the clients say that are not are marginal and have not been connected, and I can kind of offer them up as connections to what they're dealing with in the moment. So again, for me, the my favorite part of counseling is the spontaneity that should occur, and the transparency and the genuineness has to be there in order for it to be able to occur.
Yeah, I think for me, it's I liked what you said, Marty. I always thought of life as a combination of magic and effort. If you put some effort forth, some magic will meet you part way. But For me, it's being in a state where I'm similar to going into a class or a musical performance. Just I'm kind of empty and ready to be with the person. And if we get in what I would call the zone, that's probably the sweetest experience for me. Things are flowing naturally, and I'm not terribly burdened by a sense of self. It's nice.
I had a lot of thoughts about what my answer should be, and I thought a lot about client growth and outcomes and all the things that we're hoping to see with folks. But I think for me, what it really comes down to is the connection that I am in it to build with people. And I think also as a person-centered therapist, just recognizing how truly therapeutic and healing authentic connection can be. I think it's a mutuality that we don't find a whole lot of other places in this world. And magic really spoke to me, Marty, when you answered. That's sort of how it feels to me when I've got just that really solid foundation of connection with somebody.
Yeah, thanks for your answers, everybody. Especially like hopping into this in the last, more officially, I suppose. Because I think we all kind of, right, like we have interactions with people that are akin to some forms of counseling in many ways throughout our lives. But hopping into it this half of this year as a new counselor, I think one of the things that I've been surprised about is how much it's affected like my life outside of the therapy room, I suppose, because like I'm obviously like not providing counseling to, like other people in my life as like in the same way that I am providing it in the room. But I've noticed one thing that's helped me out a lot is just intentionally listening in session has helped me more intentionally listen like outside of session. And listening is it's made listening a lot more, I'd say enjoyable to me, where I don't have to feel like I'm necessitated to provide something in a conversation, whether it be inside of the counseling room or outside the counseling room. I think sometimes in the past, I perceived that there was this pressure that there was this like back and forth this strange cadence that sort of must be met or something like that in order for me to sort of like get my opinion in or my word in. And sometimes I can still do this for sure, because I think that we all do enjoy talking and feeling heard. But I've definitely noticed that like providing listening inside of session, really actively listening, and then being able to like use that, I'm person-centered right now as well. Just because it feels really comfortable to me. It feels really congruent and authentic for me. And I do wonder sometimes, right, like how many people are coming in and maybe they don't have someone in their life who like will sit down and listen to them for like maybe even 10 minutes, maybe even 15 minutes or 30 minutes, right, let alone like 60 minutes. And that, obviously there's more going on than just listening inside the room, right, because, I'm still engaging with the client and making it conversational. But listening, I think, like has put me more at ease and kind of like allowed me to like relinquish control to someone else and to hear about their experiences, their stories, their narratives, their emotions, their thoughts, all that kind of stuff. And it feels strangely, I would say, like mutually therapeutic just to like sit and like listen to someone, sort of something that I found unexpected. And, as I've hopped in, as it's like, moved into other areas of my life, I've continued to find it therapeutic. And it's like, oh, I can just like talk less and that's okay, and so like that's been one of my favorite things, kind of like inside and outside of counseling. It's just like more engaging with the listening, the active listening process.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to talk about this. This I think was a great question. about the aspects of counseling. My question is a little bit off of that. And as I said, the question kind of spurred this. What talent is it that you have that's unique and special to you?
I don't know that I have one that's unique to me, thinking about the masses of humanity, that we are part of. But I have a type of eidetic memory for faces. Sometimes it's called super rememberer, but when I can do it with actors, even if they're under a pile of makeup, there's something in my brain that also comes with a taste and a smell. And I just, all of a sudden, I remember who they were, in other films or people I've met, maybe years ago, but I meet them again and my brain clicks on.
Yeah, I had a hard time answering this one as well from the unique perspective. I'm not sure that, as much as I would love to think there's something about me that I'm good at that nobody else on the face of the planet is, it's really hard for me to wrap my brain around that. Something that has come into my attention recently is my nail techs always have music playing. And I guess I have a habit of picking up on whatever song and humming it. I don't consider myself a particularly musical person. But they've been shocked at certain points that I know songs that they're playing, and I don't know any of the songs that they're playing. I guess I just pick up on the tune quickly. So that's been kind of a funny thing that we've been talking about the last few times I've been in, or they'll point out to me, "You're doing it again." So I didn't know that about myself.
So I like this question. I'm gonna go back to my previous answer, and I've noticed a lot more that I think that there's a couple things for me that are just like generally going on that I've noticed as I've gotten older is kind of like my attention to audio, and I wouldn't necessarily say that this is a talent or something, but I wonder how it's been developed. Certainly, right, like if people are just kind of like seeing the video, I've got like a keyboard in the background, play piano, and experienced a lot of like audio stuff growing up, a high focus on audio in my life, both from like instruments, from music, from, admittedly people, and that audio became such an important regulatory tool in my life. But importantly, like one of the things is like I notice a lot of like soft audio or like specific kind of like sounds that like I'll just kind of like notice, and like I'll look around the room and I'm just like, did anybody else kind of like notice those sounds? And now I feel like I'm like saying I have auditory hallucinations. That's not what's going on. It's more along the lines of, right, like that, like any kind of sound is typically like, even if it's, especially if it's very soft, it's something that I'll place my attention on. And I do wonder if it's because, right, like a lot of my growing up was musical. And so, right, like one of the things that I always, even though it's not a unique talent, I try to remind myself that no matter how, bad I think that I am after like a particular like practice session on piano, that it's like a really hard instrument to play. And it's something that takes a really long time for people to learn and to kind of like continue with. I think I heard, from somebody told me, it's like, well, like, you're a better piano player than 99% of the people in the world just by virtue of like playing it for just even like a few years, which is kind of like crazy to me to think about, and I'm certainly not like comparing myself to other people saying, oh, like I'm a better piano player than other people. But it's important to celebrate like the things that we are good at and that we do have as a talent and that are special to us. And so in that way, I think like, I do definitely like treat my musical ability and sort of like my hearing like with some appreciation and praise, because I do appreciate that part of myself a lot, and it's even if it's not necessarily like unique to compared to everybody else, it feels unique to me, and so I like that.
Elliott and Britt kind of humbled me when they said, well, in comparison to the millions of people out in the universe, it's hard for me to say what is really unique because there are so many other people, and I was like, all right, I'm going to go right for my answer in this case. As I've gotten older, and it wasn't present when I was younger. I had good memory when I was younger. I had better memory then than I think I have now. But when I was a younger, I didn't connect things. And in not connecting those things, I just kind of led a very linear kind of life with that. And that played out in my job and it played out in my counseling. I think what I've gotten better at, and it's actually kind of unique because people don't know how I'm able to do that, is I have recall for things that someone has said or some experience that they've told me about that I can then pull into the present moment that they're talking about something completely different and make that connection. And it's because I'm not connecting things linearly. I'm connecting things more, I think, in more of a symbolic space. So people are surprised when I bring back stuff that's been part of my conversation with them from months or years back. It's like, whoa, yeah, right. So I kind of think that's unique for me in that sense. And it means that like Mitch has kind of said, and also Britt has said, it's like just being quiet and really listening, I think is really important. And in order for me to be able to do that, and then kind of code the things that are happening in the moment, and then tying it back or remembering what this person has said or done in the past. And it's not a gotcha moment. It's isn't this wild how the whole universe is connected? It feels unique to me. It might not be. Other people might have that same kind of experience, but people are generally surprised when I use that approach or when I'm in a meeting and then I kind of do a synthesis of what's going on based on how the process has been months prior. I think people are just generally surprised that I have that skill set. So that's my answer. And it is the last of our questions for the panel as it goes. Everybody submitted the question, but we have one final shot question. And the question is, since we've got Thanksgiving coming up, is anybody doing a Thanksgiving meal? Is anybody cooking a Thanksgiving meal?
Oh, yeah. Got 15 coming.
Yeah.
Okay. And Mitch is just going to stay home and play piano?
No, I was actually invited to a friend's family's house for Thanksgiving, which I am very excited for.
To play piano?
No, maybe. A little less political talk this year is the intention. So I'm excited to be to get an opportunity to go ahead. This is a friend from one of my best friends from high school. So excited.
I think the comment I heard about that was don't talk about politics at Thanksgiving because you'll wind up hating your family more than you already do. And I am going to head out to my sister-in-law's house, and we'll be there for the weekend. And I don't get to cook Thanksgiving, but I get to cook the day after Thanksgiving. And I've done the day after meals for 25 years now as we meet and as we do that. So let's go ahead and ask the question. What's your favorite Thanksgiving side?
Stuffing, 100%.
Is there anything you do particular with your stuffing that makes it your favorite?
Oh, yeah. My daughter and I cook it up the day before. And ironically, we don't stuff it in the bird. So some regions of the country would say it's called dressing. But there's a whole debate we won't get into now. yeah, it's a lovely. You cook a lot of vegetables in butter, and then you soak the bread in it, and then you season it and heat it up, and oh, it's lovely.
That sounds amazing. I also love stuffing. But my favorite is probably my mom's green beans, not to be confused with green bean casserole. Sauteed on the stove, some onions, butter, a couple seasonings that are secret. So good.
For me, I'm just gonna like admit how much I love bread. And, like any kind of like rolls and like any kind of like croissants. Like it just, I've eaten so many by the end of the meal that it's just like one of the times in the year where it's like, okay, well, clearly nobody else loves bread as much as I do, and so we're just going to finish this entire basket. You know, whatever remaining, but there's never any like leftover bread. Like if I'm there at Thanksgiving, and just like I don't know, love bread.
This is a hard question for me to answer. I think it's the answer that I have is whatever I've cooked the day after Thanksgiving. And I do theme meals after Thanksgiving, and so and it's generally something I have not cooked before. So, for example, last year it was pasta fagioli. That was just one of the components of it. One Thanksgiving I did chicken and waffles. So it's whatever the unique thing is that I haven't cooked becomes my favorite. This year I'm doing tamales. So that'll probably wind up being one of my favorites. I'm sure our listeners and viewers have their own sense of their favorites for Thanksgiving, whatever that is. I think there are a lot of stuffing people out there because you don't get it any other time of the year, and typically. And so I think that's why it becomes a favorite. I also think green bean casserole is probably people's favorites. I love cooking, and I love cooking Thanksgiving. I don't get to do it that often. And sometimes I will just make a Thanksgiving meal because it's the middle of the year and I feel like doing it. So anyway, that's it for this show. And thank you for joining us again. This new platform that we're attempting to use has its errors and has its learning curve for me. Let's just put it that way. You can look for some of these characters on their podcasts, thepodtalk.net. You can find out more about them at circularfiringsquad.net. Really, we've kind of moved everything over to the podtalk.net, so you can find our website and the tab on that. Make sure to check out the Tech Savvy Professor, hosted by Eric, who's usually with us, but I think he's at some award ceremony in Cleveland for his daughter, and they thought they might make it back. But we do the Tech Savvy Professor typically on Tuesdays. Vision Profiles, a podcast about the Apple Vision Pro, and a new one that I've started in the last week called The Old Mac Gang. And it's plus 75-year-old people talking about how they use Apple products and the concerns that they have. Scammers is a big topic that we'll talk about sometime. We've been talking just about troubleshooting, but we keep it short. And it comes out weekly. Won't be here this week because of Thanksgiving, but usually Wednesday nights. Our theme music is from Menage a Quad, Real Swing Shet. That's it for this episode of Circular Firing Squad. Everybody say bye.
Bye.
Ready, aim, ready, fire, aim.